Hey everyone, it's Brenda back again with another episode of Three Uniques. Today I'm really excited. This is my first time interviewing two people at the same time. So we've got on the founders of the Thoughtful Co. We've got Jillian Climie and then Sophie Warwick. I'm going to talk a little bit about them in a few minutes, but I'm first going to say hi, welcome.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us.
This is going to be great. I just recently discovered your company. So here's what I know about it is that both of you are both passionate about gender equity and you've come together and I want to understand that a little bit more. But Jillian's background is you've got, background in career advising, leading teams in executive compensation, corporate governance. You've worked on different equity programs with, big brands like Lululemon, which is amazing. And then Sophie, you've got like an interesting background considering like we're talking about equity, but you're coming at it from a structural engineering background, which is kind of cool. And you're in this consultancy world. And what I understand is that in 2018 you started the Women in Consulting Engineering Group, which is a nonprofit supporting women in engineering. So yeah, I'm curious about how the two of you came together, what Thoughtful Co is all about, how can we learn more about pay equity, especially for women in business. Anyways, lots of questions, but welcome and yeah. So tell me a little bit about Thoughtful Co and how you came together.
Thanks so much for having us. We're really excited to be here. In so many ways, it was a very organic journey into the Thoughtful Co. I mean, as you said, my background's in structural engineering, so obviously very different than what I'm doing now. But I think so much of my experience in that field is what led me to where I am today. And I really found when I was starting in structural engineering, being even particularly male dominated within the engineering world,
Mm-hmm.
I really lacked seeing female representation at senior levels, but also at a peer level. I found it really difficult to connect with mentors. I found networking really difficult. Asking people to go out for coffee or a drink after work when you're trying to connect with clients got a little bit more awkward for me.
Right.
And that was really what led me to found or co-found Women in Consulting Engineering in 2018 to try and build that sense of community that I wasn't able to get in my workplace because there were so few women, and trying to bring that together from a bunch of different companies. And that was when I started to feel that push that I was seeing that same pattern that I was having for many women that I was connecting with from different companies, and then starting to even see allied professionals coming to that group and saying, I'm not in engineering, but I have that problem too. And so that's really when I partnered with Jill, and we were both so passionate about improving and making changes for gender equity in the workplace, looking for an opportunity to provide that support for more industries and for more women. And so we initially started as a blog, just writing about things that we were passionate about relating to gender equity in the workplace, and slowly kind of spiraled into where we are today, which is really exciting.
And is this something that the two of you like work full time in? Are you still continuing on with your structural engineering consultancy? And Jillian, are you still like involved in executive compensation? I'm just kind of curious how this has evolved into your practice today.
Yeah, so we're both full-time at it now, which we didn't start with. We transitioned into that over time, and we've been almost exactly a year now since we started, which is crazy. And we're lucky that we have been able to make this our full-time thing, which is awesome. And yeah, I think for me, I had really spent my career in executive compensation and seen so many successful, intelligent, amazing women not negotiating their compensation at really key points in their career, and kind of always had this kind of bug in the back of my head that I wanted to do something about it. And ended up leaving Lululemon and just taking some space actually to figure out what I want to do. And
Hmm.
when Sophie and I went for sushi one time and started this blog, and then it kind of naturally turned into what it is today. And our ultimate mission really is to support women in the workplace, and then coming at that from two angles. One is helping women negotiate their compensation, so one-on-one prep sessions, contract review, financial modeling of equity compensation, all those different things. And then also supporting employers, as Sophie mentioned. So kind of coming at it from both angles, knowing that likely both sides need support. And yeah, still doing, we do a bit of pay equity things and stuff for employers around there. So still using my background a little bit, on the compensation side, but also really kind of supporting on the other side of the negotiating table now than I was previously.
Okay, very cool. And so, I mean, Jillian, you've probably had experience with this, but like what separates you from, say, like the big guys out there, like the Mercers and the Watson groups that are obviously doing compensation modeling for big organizations, but even small. I've used them in the past in my corporate executive background. So I'm just kind of curious, like what's the difference in your offer compared
Yeah.
to some of those bigger firms?
That's a really great question. And I would say, so first off, we're not a compensation consulting firm. So we are a firm that supports companies in implementing more equitable practices. One way you can do that is through compensation, but we don't do like the fulsome support that Mercer or Towers does.
Okay.
And really our target market is smaller male dominated industries and companies who may not have, a giant HR team and a bunch of resources. And coming in and really looking at the current policies, reviewing them, seeing where changes need to be made, and then actually helping them implement those and doing them. So almost like being a member of their team for a little bit. And so we've been, with engineering firms, construction companies, some finance. So, companies who don't have the resources to be doing a lot already, and the resources to be, getting a huge Mercer Towers analysis, which is awesome. But that's not kind of in their budget in any time in the future. So it is those smaller ones where we found we can make the most impact. And I would say Sophie's experience working in engineering her full career and helping engineering firms do this really gives us credibility in being able to work with these companies and understand where they're coming from as well. But yeah, so not really trying to, compete with the really big ones who have really fulsome analysis, which is awesome.
Right.
But yeah, so not direct competitors, of course.
Okay. Okay. Good to know. And then, I mean, we often hear there's like tons of blog posts and periodicals out there that are talking about all the downside of pay equity and the gap between men and women in the workforce. What are some of the positive things? Like, because I always read about all the like the sad stories and the doomsday stories, and not that I don't want to hear about those things, but it's more like there are good things that are going on in organizations or things that you've been leading with some of the the client groups that you've been supporting. What are some examples of like really good practices that kind of open up the door to better conversations around compensation for women?
Yeah, I love that question. We've never been asked it before. And
Yeah.
so one side of what we do is we do workshops for women's organizations, universities, stuff like that, where we talk about compensation negotiation. And we always show a slide that shows the biases and the pay gap and kind of the negatives we're talking about. But then we like to spin it and say, companies are starting to acknowledge this. Like it's not a new topic anymore in most. And I wouldn't say we're in a place where companies are getting it right yet by any means. That will be really hard to do in practice. Also, working inside compensation teams my full career, I know how hard it is to do. But it's being acknowledged, and managers and employers are more open to negotiating and also are more aware of their biases when a woman is negotiating versus a man, which is awesome. So we're starting to see change there. And then on the employee side, we're starting to see people talk about their compensation more, especially women, which is so, so important, because having that open conversation and being able to understand where you are in comparison to your peers is so helpful for negotiating. Starting to see it be less taboo. And women, I think, are also ready to start asking for what they deserve. Even this offering, since we've launched it a year ago, there's been such positive response. People come to workshops, booking in sessions, like we want to be paid equitably, we're ready. And so it's just been so great to see that. Whereas I feel like, in a while back, it was more taboo to talk about. It wasn't coming up a lot, and women probably weren't negotiating at all. So I think there's definitely, it's on a positive momentum for sure. And lots of good change happening.
That's great. And then Sophie, I read in your profile just some work that you've been doing around employee resource groups and like really generating that. Can you give me some examples of kind of how you've supported that or continue to do that?
Yeah, I'm really passionate about employee resource groups. I think they're such a great tool for making long-term change, but I also think they have the added benefit of getting that immediate support into a group. And so I always think of, if I'm thinking of a women's employee resource group or ERG, I think about them as the front line to achieving gender equity in the workplace, because really, I mean, we can all make assumptions about what a particular minority group within a company needs, but the people who are going to identify what challenges they're facing and the gaps in support are the people who have that lived experience and can say, this would be really impactful to me if we had that. And with employee resource groups as well, they can be, those individuals can also help to make that change and implement it. Obviously, working very closely with HR and with the senior leadership, but also can take on that leadership skill of being able to actively implement and manage that. And I think being really mindful about the structure and organization, because I think ease without proper coaching and support, I think passion can get us so far, but it is easy to turn it into something that's not necessarily making change and being measured. And so having good support in the structure and the organization of it and how to track and measure success and set reasonable targets, I think is really impactful, because I really believe, I think we're at this critical turning point where people, individuals and companies alike, are recognizing the value of equity, diversity, and inclusion, but aren't always sure how to make change.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a successful employee resource group can be such a good tool to say, help set targets. So maybe looking at a 50% representation at a senior level by X year, and how do we move towards that? And that target, sometimes when I say that, people get a bit funny about setting a specific target, but the target itself can be a range. It
Sure.
can be within 10 to 20%, and then at least you're moving towards that direction.
Right.
And I think implementing that measurement is a really powerful tool in making that change. So it's not just we're doing things that make us feel good, but still people are leaving and we're not sure why.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, if it's not creating change, then it's difficult to, think about what you can do to make those improvements. So I think that's always good to sort of look at it. And you can still have the anecdotal feedback around, hey, this was great. I felt like I was heard and I see changes happening and it's a positive direction. But I think, like you said, having some metrics around it can be really effective. Not that I'm looking for a top 5 list or a top 3 list, but what would you say to a woman right now that's inside in an organization feeling like she's being overlooked for promotions or new projects, or again earning potential in her company? What would you say are the first couple of things that she should be doing?
Yeah, I think after working with many different women over the past year, new university grads to senior executives, I think it's been interesting for us to see that so many say the same things to us. They say, I just felt lucky to get the job. I didn't feel the need to negotiate or wanted to prove myself first before negotiating.
Right.
And then, anecdotally, we are working so hard for our companies right now. And in the situation you just kind of talked about, we're putting so much value into our companies, putting so much time. We're not taking that much time to make sure we're getting the best possible offer, which is salary, but it's also bonus and equity and flexible work and schedule and severance and vacation and RSPs and all these other pieces. So I would say first kind of take the time and allocate the time and investment if you need it to feel really good about prepping for what you want to ask for, and feel in a really good place to actually do that. I think the one reason we see sometimes negotiations not go well or not go the way we want them to is when you haven't prepped enough. And because we're working so hard and managing 8 million things outside of work often too, we haven't given ourselves the chance to really go in strongly. Right. So I say in that situation, kind of look at yourself, look what you add to the company, really understand what your unique strength is, which I know you're really good at getting that out of people, and what you add to the company that no one else can do. Mm-hmm. Really good about that, feel solid in that. And from there, you can start to build your compensation case around. And that can be, researching a bit to get market info if you need. I always take that with a grain of salt, what you can find online. But talking to contacts, mentors, women's groups, networks that you have, or leveraging advisors if you need to feel really good about that number. And then really crafting and spending the time to create a little script or whatever it might be to feel really good about what you're going to ask for and really set up and prepared to do it. We often say take the day off before a negotiation.
That's a good idea.
Easy, but when else do you so directly have the ability to impact your future wealth?
Right.
And we sometimes just don't allocate the time and prep. We sometimes do for our teams and then leave ourselves to the last minute.
Yeah.
That would be our biggest kind of recommendation, which is not the most, fancy one, but it's really preparation.
Well, I mean, when you said take the day off before you start your negotiation, that could be to prep, but also just to get your mindset in the right space. I was on
Yeah.
a Instagram live this morning just talking about sort of 5 ways to release money blocks. And one of them is just spend some time like processing your thoughts about like, okay, I'm going into a compensation meeting tomorrow with my boss. And like the first thought could be like, what if I screw it up? Right. And so then it's just like, what's going to happen after that. Right. Like you're just going to
Yeah.
now prep the whole day so that you're not going to screw it up versus actually, well, what do I want it to be like? I want it to be like a learning conversation. I want it to be like an expansive conversation and really like getting yourself around that versus, yeah, like you're opening 300 emails the day before
Yeah.
you're supposed to do your compensation and you're running around and it's the last thing. So I think that's,
Yeah, it's so
that is
true. Even sleeping in and like feeling really well rested before you go into it is
right.
so important. And another thing that we often say too, which you kind of brought up, is it doesn't need to be a big negative, aggressive conversation. You can ask for more money in a really positive way and still be clear and confident and direct in what you want. And I think a lot of women especially choose not to negotiate because they don't want to seem aggressive. But negotiation is an everyday conversation. As you know, you've worked in HR.
Right.
Compensation teams literally do this every day. It's part of the employer-employee relationship. So I think also realizing that just kind of normalizes it a little
Yeah.
bit.
Well, there's also probably, again, thinking back to sort of some of that mindset work is that I've been not having the conversation. So I've been stockpiling all these stories about why I'm not making more money. And then I just go in there and it's just like, blah, and it's just like,
Yeah.
it's literally that all over the table. Or I'm already defensive because I already think the answer is going to be no
Yeah.
because I've already been telling my story to myself that it's going to be no versus like, okay, take that time off, take the day off, like go for a really nice walk, whatever, do some of that indulgent, self-care work that is like so important for you. And then go into that meeting feeling like, yeah, like this is good. Like I'm going to learn from it. It's going to be a conversation. I don't have to debate it. It doesn't have to be like a negative outcome from this. So
Yeah, it's so true because I think oftentimes we build it up as this big, really negative thing, but at the end of the day, the reason that we're in there having that conversation is because we're passionate about the role we're in or the employer that we're working for. If we weren't, we would move away and we wouldn't invest the time to do that. But you are, and you just need to make some adjustments to get to that number that makes you feel comfortable to keep growing in that role. And so it's coming from a really positive place of, I like it here and I want to stay here. And I think getting that mental shift makes it easier to go into that conversation. And remember, you're not asking for something unreasonable. You're just negotiating to continue succeeding in your role.
right. I love that. Okay, you're also here to share your three uniques because I could go on and talk about compensation. I'm very passionate about women making more money. Like I totally believe in that, and it's not just about more money as in the sake of like just having more, but when I know fundamentally, and there's tons of stats out there. Like I follow Elvest, and like when women have access to money, they can do really amazing things for their community, their family, and as far as generational wealth, compounding over generations is huge. So I'm more
Yeah,
and
it's a power thing. That's kind of how we think about it. Like
yeah.
shift money, has so much impact on power and really held in one gender more right now. So
Right.
in that power shift to be a little bit more equal. That's kind of how we think about it. It's totally agree. It's beyond just money.
Right. Okay, but I want to hear about your three uniques too. So, so let's hear them.
So our three are determined, values driven, and experienced. And these are kind of ones we had come up for both of ourselves as well as the Thoughtful Co. Sophie and I have a lot of things in common in how we work. And of course we have differences, but these are kind of ones that we feel we both have really in common and make us unique, and therefore the Thoughtful Co unique as well. So the first one is determined, and I think as you know, being an entrepreneur, you have to ride the ups and downs, and we've learned that. And I think we've both identified why we've been able to do this so well is we've been so determined from day one. There's never been a moment where we've thought this, this isn't, I mean, we've obviously thought this is crazy, but we've never had a moment where we wanted to not be doing this. And I think that's a unique skill set. Our drive and our passion and how hard we work at this is something that makes us really unique. And we do the same for our clients. Like part of the Thoughtful Co, what we called our company is being thoughtful and intentional about everything we do. We don't want to be a consulting firm that makes you one deck and then has to revise it 8 million times and
Right.
a lot of time and money in all those things. We really want to do it well the first time. And same with our individual compensation negotiation clients. I feel like it's myself negotiating when I'm supporting them. So that's really our first one, determination. And then the second one is values driven, which kind of leads into it. But we both independently are so passionate about gender equity. And that's why we started this company. And that's what drives us every day. And that's what makes us want to do the best possible support for our clients. So that one kind of speaks for itself, given what we do. And then the third one is experienced. And I think something that differentiates us from other consulting and compensation negotiation support services that don't really exist. So we don't have a huge amount of competitors there, but is I do have that really, niche technical experience of working inside compensation teams and in consulting firms at this for so long. So I'm able to see both sides of it and to give a more holistic perspective with our advice. And then Sophie has done this gender equity work within really male dominated industries, which takes different nuance than, a bigger company like Lululemon, who's a leader in that space.
Right.
So she's a trusted expert in that space, which definitely makes us more unique than others coming into it. So those were our 3 ones.
That's amazing. That's great. And how, 'cause it was great how you sort of defined them, but then also gave some examples about how it just sort of plays out sort of daily in your business. So my question is, when you're thinking about doing work or aligning with a certain client, how do those 3 qualities, the determination, the values driven, and the experience, play into that? Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I was going to say that I think in terms of when we're on the sort of determined page, as an entrepreneur, you're riding those ups and downs, and then sometimes you have a down and you're trying to figure out how do we respond and how do we pivot. And we would always, I think, working well together, we're really good at saying, okay, what's the path in the road here? We're not going to get too low in this low, and how can we pivot? And I think that really shows how determined we are. But in that also, we were very strong about not following paths that didn't align with our core values and who we wanted to be. So unless something was either directly related to our values or was a means to get to work that was related to our values, we wouldn't go down that path because it wasn't who we wanted to be, and we're okay to say no to that. And I think that's really difficult but important. And I think it relates to so much to why we did this. We wanted something that was really important to us and that we felt was serving the world in a very important and meaningful way. And I think our experience in that field is very unique and has allowed us to do that and allowed us to get into rooms with people we might not otherwise been able to get in front of.
I love that. And I love the fact that, sticking to your values, it's something that I talk about quite a bit with my clients when they're formulating, their ideas around their business and how they want to launch it. Which I think is also a little bit unique for women entrepreneurs, not to single out men, and not to say that male founders aren't necessarily looking at values driven, but I think it's always the debate between growth and values, right? And that like what comes first, sort of chicken egg? Do you go for growth first and then worry about values later and sort of clean up, your backyard afterwards? Or do you lead by values first and that growth will come as a result of, working on the values? So I love the fact that, there's been times where you've had to say no. And I think that that's a good thing. Speaking of entrepreneurship, I mean, we've been talking a lot about women and compensation inside organizations. Now, there's the whole quiet quitting thing that's going on, great resignation, but even before all those like buzzwords were coming out on social media, and in Wall Street Journal and all these other periodicals, we were seeing like over the course of the pandemic over the last 2 years, exodus of women leaving organizations, either to just resign, take time off, stay at home, or to start something similar to maybe the two of you. I'm not going to make any assumptions there, but so is that something that you come across with some of the women that you're consulting? Like, yeah, do I go in there and, ask for more money from my boss and my company, or do I just leave and start something?
Mhm.
Like, how do you approach those conversations when women, maybe bring that up with you?
Yeah, we've definitely had this conversation kind of around our workforces working for women right now in general. And I think, as you mentioned, there's like mass burnout across the board. And then I think women handling, usually taking on, not always, but often taking on more of the parenting responsibilities or supporting with aging parents or, helping 8 million other things that they do outside of work. And I think that
Right.
just really adds up. And then also anecdotally with our experience of women feeling like they constantly need to prove themselves in their work, that
Mhm.
can lead to overworking and burnout. And I've definitely experienced that myself, and I've seen many others who have. Um, and I think one thing that we really try to support our clients with is absolutely asking for more money and the money that you deserve, but also where else can we look at within the contract, within the role scope, that can really make work better for you. So
Mhm.
for example, if you need to work from home every Friday so you can be really efficient on that day and then not work all weekend, or more vacation or sabbatical or all these other pieces
Right.
that are coming up, more parental leave, things like that. So we're really trying to support clients thinking about that up front. It's often an afterthought, and really base salary is just focused on. But
Mhm.
things can actually be really easy to get in offers up front, especially now, like fitness allowances or other wellness things like that. Like there's so much really cool and interesting stuff that employers are starting to put out. So really focusing on that. But then we also do support women who have left the workforce and are starting their own things and helping them set rates, which we've been through the trial and different testing, and we've created a little workbook now to try to
Okay.
figure
Cool.
out how to make your rates, which is based off things like market and industry and all these other factors, but
Yeah.
also based off how many hours you want to work a week, and what is your desired salary. So let's actually triangulate it both ways, not just let the market set it for you.
Right.
We love helping women with that because we've been through it. And I think there's definitely, I'm sure you see this within entrepreneurs, a lot of us are undervaluing ourselves, and with our hourly rates and things we charge, which can actually delegitimize us in the eyes of companies or clients.
Yeah, absolutely. And, if we're not sort of clearing or cleansing ourselves from that sort of employee employer relationship before we become the entrepreneur, where we're actually the owners and we can set our own
Mhm.
take home pay, is we end up, and I was even sharing this with some clients yesterday in our group coaching call, we end up still running our companies like we're employees. And we're actually now the boss, and
Yeah.
we determine exactly what our take home pay is going to be.
Yeah.
So, I think like until we actually end that sort of conversation, close the door to the employee employer relationship before we start our entrepreneurial journey, we'll bring that sort of energy over into our businesses. So that's one thing. And I think the second thing is it's concerning for me because I've always been on the path in my corporate career of like either HR or people development, even as a department head, regardless if I was in HR or operations, always developing women, but men, like developing my entire team. And so when I see that sort of brain drain leaving the organization, like women leaving organizations and we've been working so hard over the last 10, 20 years to get women into higher levels of leadership. And we're seeing people not only at, frontline employee levels, but also at senior executive levels where they've been working for the last 10, 15 years to get up to that executive level, and now they're gone. And they might be starting something, they might be taking a time off, whatever, but it's just that brain drain that's leaving the organization after that time. And they're leaving as those mentors for younger women starting their career, which is also concerning. So I'm just, when clients come to me, or potential clients come to me and say, hey, I'm thinking about leaving my organization and starting something and I want to work with you. And I'm like, have you thought through that yet? Because there's so many valuable things that you've offered, that industry or that company, before you toss it all out. Not to say that it's a bad thing to be an entrepreneur, but
it's very different.
Yeah.
It's very different. And that is a good perspective to have. It's like getting to the core of what's making you make that decision, because I think so often, just anecdotally, I hear women more often, I think, than men, just finding that the corporate world hasn't historically been set up for them and feeling exhausted by that, like a salmon swimming up a river, that I can't fight for this forever. So I can leave and create an environment that works for me, which I think is really a valiant effort as well. And if there's something that's super passionate that's driving you, that's amazing. But it does make me recognize that employers need to do more to help intercept and support those people to prevent them from leaving if it works for them as well.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Okay, I have a final question for you, which I love to end the podcast with. And it's going to be different because there's going to be the two of you. So we'll see how this lands. If I was to give you a billboard and you could put anything on it and it could be anywhere in the world, where would you put it and what would be on it?
Oh, wow. That's a great question.
That is a really good one. I'm going to go with my gut reaction here.
I'll give you two billboards, one for Jillian, one for Sophie. So you don't have to.
Yeah, let's do separate. I don't know. Well, so mine, this is obviously in line with what we do and what I'm thinking, but it would be, this is what automatically came to mind, a white billboard with like bold black text that says, pay women what they deserve. And in terms of where in the world, that's a really good question. I'm trying to think of where it would be most impactful. So I was thinking like Times Square or something like that. But yeah, I guess I'll go with that. That was my gut reaction. So yeah.
Okay. Sophie?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I would say it relates to what we do, but also to my own passion too. I think I would say you deserve to be here too. And that relating to just recognizing from a gender equity perspective, but on an individual basis, or whatever makes you different than what's considered the norm in your environment or whatever, and just recognizing. So I think any of us who've been in environments where we look different than the people around us, it's easy to say, well, thanks for having me, and I'm not going to push to ask for that raise or that promotion. But recognizing you got that role and you've been moving along that path because you do deserve to be there too. Right. And then in terms of where I'd put it, I think I'd want to put it in front of students going into their career. So I don't know where the most would see it. Like in my head, I'm like, oh, it's high school or university, but then it's only one school or university. But I think something that's really accessible to young people to start that at the foundation of their career, not wait till they're later in their career to realize all those years that they deserved it.
I totally agree. Like the whole school system, like we could go on, that's a whole other podcast, but I mean like setting young girls up, setting all students up for, just how they can go down the career path that they want, break away from the traditional, conditioning of like, you gotta be an accountant, lawyer, doctor, or whatever that is. Like it really needs to start earlier in life. And that, kids have these possibilities that are just sort of endless, especially with technology and global community. So, but yeah, I definitely agree. Somewhere in schools, like I don't know, on a binder spine of a book or something like that, like we all had to wrap our books or something like that in school.
Yes, exactly.
Wrapping or something that says that. That's amazing. So where can people find the Thoughtful Co? What's how can they reach out and work with you?
Yeah, so you can find us on our website at thethoughtfulco.net or on Instagram at thethoughtful.co. And then we're on LinkedIn at The Thoughtful Co. Again, as if you couldn't guess that as well. And then we have a mailing list and newsletter as well that you can access from our website. So we'd love to stay in touch.
Okay, great. Well, we'll make sure that we'll have all your contact information in the show notes so people can find you that way. Um, Sophie, Jillian, it's been a pleasure having you on today. Thank you so much for sharing your three uniques and just giving us more perspective on what's happening in the world of pay equity and what women can do. Because I think there's a lot of times where their hands are sort of like they're feeling like they're not able to take action. And I think you're building out resources that are going to help change that for people. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for having us. Those were great questions. Really
Okay, good. I'm glad. I'm glad there was that original one in there that you hadn't heard before. That's good.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Keep us on our toes.
And for everyone else that's listening, I always say at the end, there's 7.8 billion people on this planet. So get out there and share your three uniques. Somebody needs what you've got. Take care.